What if there was a zombie? What would happen to the stock market, the economy, the entire world as we know it? The first thing that would happen is the collapse of everything. Even though they're fictional, people are genuinely scared of zombies. And when fear takes hold of people's minds, that's when the apocalypse happens. It feeds on itself. When the news broke about the first case of a person reanimating after being clinically dead, the stock market would go into total chaos. People would immediately panic and start pulling their money out of banks, leading to an immediate bank run. But even before the bank run started, investors would begin selling their stocks and closing their positions. The sudden increase in selling pressure would lead to a further decline in prices, deepening the crisis and leading to more people wanting to get out of the market. In fact, the entire economy would go into complete meltdown. Investors would quickly pull their money out of the markets, causing a sharp drop in prices. Global financial markets would crash as investors struggle to cope with the implications of a reanimated corpse roaming around the city. The World Health Organization would likely declare a state of emergency, which would send shockwaves through the global economy. Many businesses would likely collapse under the weight of the economic uncertainty, leading to job losses and further panic among investors. The value of the US dollar would likely plummet, which would cause havoc for the global economy. Trading partners would scramble to find alternative sources of currency, and the chaos would cause the price of imports to skyrocket. The United States would become a less desirable destination for foreign investment as investors would move their money to safer economies. So the economic impact of this event would be catastrophic. It would undermine confidence in the US economy and trigger a recession or even a depression. But this is only the beginning. A single zombie would not be able to do much harm. The real trouble begins when these reanimated corpses start to spread and grow in numbers. At this point, governments around the world would start to panic. They would need to take drastic measures to try and contain the outbreak, such as closing borders and instituting quarantine zones. These measures would likely have a devastating impact on the global economy, as trade routes would be cut off and people would be unable to travel to work. As the number of zombies grows, the situation would become increasingly dire. Entire cities could be overrun by these creatures, and at some point, the military would likely be deployed to try and stop them. But with each passing day, the situation would become more desperate. As more and more people are bitten and turned into zombies, the chances of finding a cure would become increasingly slim. Pretty soon, it would be clear that humanity is facing an extinction-level event. Now imagine you're an ordinary citizen living in this world. How would your life change if a zombie apocalypse were to occur? If you live in a big city, you'd probably want to get out as soon as possible. Big cities would be the first to fall as the number of zombies grows exponentially. As you attempt to flee the city, you would encounter gridlock and total chaos. Roads would become impassable as everyone else tries to do the same thing. You might also face danger from other humans who would be desperate to escape the city and would stop at nothing to get out. Imagine the stampede when tens of thousands of people try to cross a bridge or pass through a checkpoint. There will be riots and civil unrest as people fight over resources. Law and order would break down, and survival would become the main priority for many. Those who live far away from big cities would be better off, but not for long. Eventually, the zombies would catch up with you no matter where you went. In this world without any modern conveniences, life would be brutal. Food and water would become scarce, and people would be forced to rely on what they could scavenge. And when I say scavenge, I don't mean going to the grocery store. I mean fighting over scraps. But even getting food wouldn't be enough. Humans are social creatures, and we need community and connection to survive. But during the apocalypse, people would become isolated and cut off from their loved ones. Family and friends would be separated and left to fend for themselves. Many would die from exposure to the elements as shelter becomes hard to come by. Disease and illness would also be widespread as basic sanitation and hygiene practices can no longer be maintained. Some people would try to rebuild society and create new communities, but it would be a difficult task, as trust and cooperation would be hard to come by. Fear and suspicion would be prevalent, and many would be willing to do anything to survive. And as you wander through this post-apocalyptic landscape, you might come across some strange things. For example, what would happen to pets during the apocalypse? Dogs, cats, birds, all the pets we love so much would be left to fend for themselves. They would become wild animals once again, scavenging for food and trying to stay alive in a world that has gone crazy. Imagine a pack of dogs running through the streets, chasing down fleeing humans and biting those who get too close. Cats would also become vicious hunters, preying on smaller animals and even on humans. Now, you may think that I'm exaggerating, but it's true. Animals are capable of doing anything when it comes to survival. They have instincts that are thousands of years old, and they are not afraid to use them. Now, let's talk about one of the most important questions. Will there ever be a zombie apocalypse? Well, the good news is that there is no evidence that this is possible. Zombies are just a figment of our imagination and the stuff of horror movies. However, there are diseases that can cause some of the symptoms that are associated with zombies. For example, there is a disease called kuru, which is a form of mad cow disease that affects humans. Symptoms include a loss of coordination, dementia, and the inability to control one's movements. But even in the worst cases of kuru, the infected person does not rise from the dead and eat the brains of their loved ones. So while it is possible to be infected with a disease that causes symptoms similar to those of a zombie, it is highly unlikely that we will ever see a true zombie apocalypse. So rest easy. We are safe from the undead. Or maybe we're not. If you want to watch another video just like this one, then check out the video on the screen. Now,